CashFlow Diary Podcast, episode 449.
Welcome to yet another exciting episode of the CashFlow Diary Podcast, the podcast that teaches you insider tips, tactics, and strategies for creating leverage streams of cash flow into your life. Learn from top-performing entrepreneurs, business owners, investors, and thought leaders from across the globe as they share their secrets to success. Like what you learn on this and other CashFlow Diary podcast episodes? Go to learninvestingnow.com and sign up to receive powerful tips and information that will help you succeed as an entrepreneur and investor. Now, here's your host, investor, entrepreneur, business owner, educator, speaker, author, and master facilitator of Robert Kiyosaki's cash flow game, Jay Massey.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the CashFlow Diary Podcast. I'm your host, Jay Massey, and I'm glad that you are here today because we're going to talk about something that you may not think is possible. In fact, I struggle with this very concept. And more importantly, it's in that struggle, it's because of that struggle that many other entrepreneurs have gone out there to create solutions. Again, where there's chaos, there's cash flow. There's lots of chaos in the marketplace in many different places, and this is definitely one. Let me ask you this question. Have you ever said to yourself, could I do well and do good at the same time? Meaning, can I earn money, or do I have to harm the environment? Do I have to harm other people? Do I have to do other things in order to make money? I think the answer is in what I call cooperative capitalism. However, I have been stumped. As a real estate guy for a long time, short-term rentals, doing whatever we do, there's always this, hey, is there a way to do this in a more environmentally friendly way? And I have always come back to the point of, I don't mind the environment. I will help, but not at the sacrifice of profit. Well, if you find yourself in that position, or if you're like, hey, I will only do business if I can find a way to be cooperative with the environment, I think today's guest is perfect for you. I have with me today none other than Joel Solomon. You may know him as the author of The Clean Money Revolution, Reinventing Power, Purpose, and Capitalism. He is a lifelong entrepreneur, co-founder, and chair of a mission venture. We're going to talk about those words. Mission venture firm, Renewal Funds, and they invest in businesses in U.S. as well as Canada, and they currently are in the $98 million range. Now, all of that to say, his entire purpose is to do well and do good at the same time. And he's going to share with us some information that I think will help all of us have a paradigm shift. So hopefully you are ready to listen, you are ready to welcome, and you are ready to write down some notes from Mr. Joel Solomon. Joel, you there?
I am. Jay, that was a wonderful introduction. Thank you for that.
You are quite welcome, sir. As I said in the introduction, I myself am stumped by something you seem to have solved, and I can't wait to get into that. But before we do, I have to ask you the same question I tend to ask everybody the first time that they're here. You ready?
I'm ready.
All right. I tend to look at today's entrepreneurs a lot like yesterday's superheroes, like Spider-Man, for example. Because I think entrepreneurs and superheroes have a ton of things in common. I mean, for example, there was a time where if you think about Spider-Man's story, he was just going to school, getting good grades, trying to make some extra pizza money. And then one day he gets bit by a spider, discovers he's got some special powers, and now he's got to choose, am I going to use them for good or evil? And I think entrepreneurs are kind of like that. There's a time where we wake up, we don't realize who we are, and then something happens and we become something completely different than we ever intended. So my question to you is as follows. Before the books, before the venture firm, before you were creating the change that you are, before you were championing the cause and winning like you guys are today, what we want to know is, who is Joel Solomon?
Okay. Thank you for that. So I was born in Chattanooga, Tennessee. I am the child ultimately of Jewish immigrants. On my mother's side, German Polish. On my father's side, Russian. Mm-hmm. And their families left Europe to escape oppression, and they came to came to America, And in both sides of the family, there was an entrepreneurial call. And, they're a classic immigrant story of working their way up. And I'll talk about my dad for the moment because he was the more recent. His father, my grandfather, ended up in Atlanta in the early part of the last century. And he lived in a neighborhood that faced a Ku Klux Klan march.
Wow.
And the Jews were having their troubles in the South. Let's just say it that way. And so the family ended up going up to Chattanooga, Tennessee, where things were quieter and safer. And there they began. They got into a movie theater business that grew into several movie theaters. It was Jim Crow era. They were dealing with that. Eventually, they had a drive-in movie theater that got blown down in a tornado, and at the same time, some real estate developers wanted some of their locations to build high-rises on, and so they bought them out. So at that point, for one thing they did first is they bought an early television license, but they decided it wouldn't work, and they sold it. So, you can't win them all.
No one's going to watch that TV stuff.
That's right. But the next thing they did is they saw the idea of the shopping center, and they took that site where the movie theater had blown down, and they decided and they built the first shopping center in Tennessee. And so that was the idea of bringing together big chain stores with small chain stores. And, they still used to put a few local ones in back then. But they did that, turned out to be a good business. The trend was going their way. They built more shopping malls. And so I grew up in a family that went from very, very modest income and circumstances to, through my teenage years, my dad began to make money. And then as I grew to adulthood, the kind of privilege and benefit that does come generationally when you've got a family that does that, I inherited a small amount of money and some properties as I got into my 30s. And so then I had to decide, what kind of business person and entrepreneur am I going to be? Because I was excited. I was excited about that superhero journey. It felt like entrepreneurship did provide an opportunity to break out of the mold and make something for yourself, use your own creativity. So anyhow, that's the setting for the story.
That's awesome. I mean, because you almost knew you were going to have this opportunity at some point in your life, and it was a matter of how you want to shape it. So I like that. Now, here's my question. Would you say that, rephrase, what would you say that you saw through that transition, being able to witness starting the way they started, going through the changes? Were there any lessons about failure, missing opportunities, starting over, looking at new things that you think has carried you into today to where you are?
Well, so I also grew up during the 60s, and I want to mention my mother. Okay. Because she ended up also being a working woman in the 60s and on into the 70s, which was not that common at that time. That was also breaking out of the mold. And she ended up doing stuff like, she was in international exchange, and she was part of an organization that brought young people from various countries to do homestays, in another country with a family. And that was about international peace and trying to understand each other's cultures and things like that. She went on to an artistic career, which is its own entrepreneurship in a way, because artists are doing things that not everybody understands, and getting your work to be seen and collected and things like that. So she was a photographer, and she got very curious about the world, and she traveled a lot, and I got to learn about a whole much broader world as well. So then the 60s are happening, and people are questioning everything. Vietnam War, assassinations of important leaders, all this kind of thing. And capitalism was getting questioned. And so my father dies. I decide I've got to go into this, and I'll just keep the story short by saying it had come clear to me that you do have some choices as an entrepreneur, and you can design businesses that are helpful, that employ people well, that think about their community, that use their benefits to help other people, maybe maybe pass on investments to help next entrepreneurs come along, all kinds of things that gives you as ability to do in the world. And so what came clear to me is world's got a lot of challenges. Money, business, and finance have a huge ability to influence the world that we live in. So why don't we attempt to do something with it that's going to make the world better? And so that was the starting place.
Interesting. Well, what you're bringing up, I think a lot of people care about, but we don't have enough information, education, resources to figure out what we can do about it. Because what you're talking about, my friend, is such a huge thing. It's like, yeah, but somebody else has to deal with that because that's beyond me. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I do. And I understand that I had some privilege, that I came from a family that was able to make their way and make some money. Mm-hmm. And that, let's just say it. I was a white kid, despite the fact that I was still had to deal with a certain kind of discrimination as a Jewish white kid. I did have opportunities that not everybody necessarily has as easily as I did. So my family struggled, but I was given a platform. But what became clear to me, and I'm going to fast forward a little bit, because if it started then as the impulse of a young man that was rebelling against systems I didn't like, and wars in foreign countries and things like that, today what I know is that there is a lot of money to be made by doing the right thing. And that's because there's a consumer that's better informed. There is an increasing awareness about the crisis that we face as population. When I was born, went from under 3 billion mm-hmm. to over 7.5 billion right now. And it's not slowing down.
That's for sure.
Few more people. It's not just environmental issues and green things. It's about people as well. So let's take real estate, for example.
Yes.
Well, eventually, the first thing I did was I inherited some properties, and the shopping mall thing was starting to become clear to me that it was killing off small businesses. It was moving everything out to the suburbs, and it was based on a whole trend that people were abandoning the city and moving out to the green pastures of the suburbs. And I thought it was tragedy that was going on in the cities as they were getting eaten away. And so my very beginning was, I'm going to go into local real estate in the city, and I want to support small businesses and do small properties. And so it was property by property to scrape together the money for a down payment, get some tenants in there. We also, with my partners and I, got early into coffee. So coffee used to be, some ground up stuff you put in. Now coffee becomes this more and more, sophisticated thing, and people get fancier about it. But the thing about coffee that I liked was it created gathering places. Mm-hmm. When I grew up, the kind of places you had to go to hang out with your friends was like, International House of Pancakes. And that was fine. But the movement of the modern cafe movement, was really driven by people that like conversation and exchange of ideas and place for people to hang out and for entrepreneurial ideas to grow up. So coffee and real estate were the beginning, and property by property, and then cafe by cafe. And then that led to other businesses. And I'll take a pause there.
Well, what I like about what your story and what you're saying is, you speak that when you have resources, whether from the ground up or inherited or built upon, or it doesn't really matter how they come to you, you talk about a responsible use of them and using them, or using that as a platform to be an agent of change in so many different ways. And your book, The Clean Money Revolution, and you talk about the idea of clean money. What I really think would help a lot of the audience, because I hear the grassroots of everything and why you're doing what you're doing. But let's talk about the difference, if you will, between the concept of clean money versus dirty money. And then let's transition that into the what is ultimately the question is, how can I do well and do good at the same time? Because you said it, there's a lot of money to be made by doing the right thing, but yet I know sometimes when I go to the store and I look at the green version of this thing, it's 4 times more expensive than the non-green version. And that definitely plays a role into the decisions that everyone is making.
That's right. So that's where entrepreneurs come in. And my premise right now is this is actually the biggest money-making opportunity in history to reinvent the economy for cleaner, more fair, and more safe. And that by doing that, and the demand for that.
Hold on.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure I heard that right. You said something that is more fair?
Yes.
I mean, I get cleaner and more safe, but more fair threw me for a loop. So I'm going to ask about that, but just know that I'm like, more fair? How? But okay.
Well, you want me? Should I go there first? You want me
by all means, please do.
Okay. Okay. Look, we just faced. By the way, I'm a dual citizen. I'm American and a Canadian now, so I'm still very involved in the U.S. And I also grew up caring about politics. So we have just seen one of the greatest tax heists in history. Trillions of dollars are being moved from people who have less to people who have the most. That's public policy. But how did that public policy come about, and who's driving it? And what are their interests? And so there's a connection there that goes all the way back to entrepreneurs, but it's certainly obvious how it goes to entrepreneurs who turned into gigantic corporations. And it also goes to, in terms of the fairness, that right now we need strength of people with entrepreneurs and who create jobs and create cash flow to stand up for things that matter. Now, if the purpose of getting wealth is to get more wealth and then more wealth infinitely and not care about anybody else or the places or the side effects of how we get that wealth, I don't think we're going to have a very good outcome for our grandchildren. Because I think now we got the power to do damage on a scale we never even dreamed possible before. Right. So human intelligence looks out at the landscape. Do I want to just burn fossil fuels and bring on climate change faster and faster and create chaos for all kinds of people, particularly the poor people, because they end up living in the places that get the most affected by toxics and by excess water and sea rise and that kind of thing, then I need to take responsibility. And I live in an era where it's very obvious I've got all the information that I need to know that regulations and the kinds of products and services that the private sector provides and what happens in politics are actually all tied together. So more fair means everybody ought to have as good of an opportunity as possible. Education, health, welfare, these things should be provided. That's what modern civilization is about, and in my view. And so if we create an environment where people have a more fair chance, then human ingenuity is going to flower, and we've got a chance to have a good future. If we continue to strip everything good, we can talk environmental, so we kind of deplete. Yesterday they announced the last white rhinoceros died. Oh. Why does that matter? Does another species matter? How many species can go until it's the human species? So there's many complexities in life. So there are environmental issues, but there's also. So let's say I've got a savings account, and I've got a retirement fund, and my retirement fund actually owns prisons, private prisons. It owns gun manufacturers, and it owns sugar industries that are selling me massive sugar, creating diabetes, getting me sick. And so if I'm going to make my money off the private prison system, off selling automatic weapons to kids, and off making millions of people sick, I just don't, I can't live with that. So how about if I make my money on lower sugar foods and rather than weapons, on modern education products, or creating opportunity for more entrepreneurs, or affordable housing, investing in affordable housing, and then creating prosperity in a community that then creates a tax base. And then with my influence as an entrepreneur, I get involved. I support the kind of candidates that care about the things I care about. And there is a chance for us together to build a better future. I have ranted and raved. I'm going to stop here for a moment.
Well, I was going to say, I wanted to play devil's advocate for a moment.
Let's do it.
Don't get me wrong. I love the connection that you have to this mission, because I've just got questions and confusion, because when I've looked into, like, there was a time where I was doing a rehab, I think it was an 72 unit building. And it was the types of rehabs that I've done in the past. They are, all the way down to the studs, nothing at all inside the building.
Yeah.
My point is, at that moment, I'm considering everything, all the materials, all the stuff to be able to go out there and put the building back together, put it into productive service, etc.
Yes.
And there was individuals on the team that were very conscious of the very things that you're talking about, and they started suggesting the products that were more environmentally sound, safe. And I mean, I think as real estate investors, we can have a major impact on the environment with everything that we're doing because of the materials, et cetera, that we're using. But I hear what you're saying, but the challenge is that we have to deliver, as an entrepreneur, my challenge is to deliver a product to the consumer that they're willing to pay for at a price that makes a profit. And if I can't do that, because of the materials, the raw goods, everything else that's required to do that, it makes the project not work now, simply because I'm trying to hit a sustainability goal. How does an entrepreneur resolve that conflict? That's my biggest question. It's like, I'd be on board if I can find a way to actually deliver the same service in a more environmentally friendly way. Hello there, entrepreneur. This is Jay Massey, and what I want to say to you is that the number one mistake that I have ever made in business, number one, has been waiting too long to do the books, waiting too long to get the bookkeepers, the accountants, the CPAs, the CFOs involved, and I don't want you to make that same mistake. That mistake cost me over 6 figures, and now for a significant discount, you have the ability to get your books together using FreshBooks. So what I want you to do is I want you to go over to gofreshbooks.com/CashFlowDiary. Again, that's gofreshbooks.com/CashFlowDiary. FreshBooks is the easy to use software designed to help you, the small business owner, the freelancer, get organized and save time on invoicing, getting paid faster, keeping those books in order so that it becomes a bonus for you to do your taxes as opposed to a burden. Go over to gofreshbooks.com/CashFlowDiary and get started today. And now let's get back to the rest of the story.
First thing I'm going to say is the world is complex. We make choices. You can put in your body the really damaging stuff that's the cheapest possible food you get.
Right.
You can put in your house toxic materials that are going to end up creating cancer. You can, but we're not going to solve it all. None of us are going to solve all this. This is about a mindset that says, how do I do the best I can in a relative world? So if you're selling to a client base that has got to have the lowest cost possible housing, then there probably is going to have to be government to get involved and to offer some incentives. So if we're talking about subsidized housing, that's one thing. In Vancouver now, they are building green subsidized housing. That's a choice that gets made with the tax dollar.
I see.
As an individual entrepreneur, who's your marketplace? If you're hitting, if you're hitting young families that have got some kids and they want to raise them in a healthy way, they're starting to realize that asthma and all kinds of strange diseases are happening because of some of the chemical substances that you're going to breathe and that you're going to come into contact with are going to get into your food system if you live in a house that's full of really nasty stuff. So are you going to buy, if it's, can you move up that ladder incrementally enough steps to at least take the worst things out of your housing project? Are you going to put in energy? Let's move to another issue. You're going to put in less energy using appliances and lights and all that kind of thing, so that your consumer is going to have a better price, is going to save money on that. Would they rather buy something where the costs are going to be lower over time or not? So as you know, real estate's complicated. It depends on which market, what kind of setting. But there are steps. There are steps that we can take in our everyday life for our own family and for other people's families. And these steps are starting to be recognized as consumer value. So that's where this comes together.
Yeah, and as you were talking, I was thinking, if I'm marketing to a consumer that cares about it, they're going to be willing to meet the hurdle necessary for me to stay in business, and that makes sense. But yeah, in the markets that I was playing in for the lower income housing, it was tough. Although I will say, the electric and plumbing issues are where we could find ways to use, less consumption. So in the utility space, it was a little bit easier to find a way to use something, but in some of the physical materials, the floors, the roofs, that stuff is really difficult.
I know, and I own rental properties, and you make that choice on every purchasing decision. But the point is, the world is advancing,
right.
Regulations are shifting, and sometimes it's not even a financial choice; it's just a choice.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about I'm curious to understand, because you use the term mission venture capital. That means something to you as it relates to your fund. And I would like to hear a little bit more about it. Because I think many people put their money to work for many different reasons, and it's not always a profit motive.
Yes.
So I would like to understand what you mean when you say the words mission venture.
Okay, well, the first thing we meant was to be able to have this question come up and have the conversation. So it's an indicator.
You check that off. That one worked.
Okay, it's an indicator that says to people what's different about what we're doing. Something's different here. Why do you call yourselves that? And the answer is because our investment focus is in organic food and skincare and environmental technologies. So our job is to help the cleaner food movement, less pesticides, less toxics, healthier for you, to get its price down over time. So none of these things happen overnight. So we invest in what is now a boom industry that when we started in it was kind of discounted as, well, that's just for rich people and that's just for hippies or something. That's just, and it's not for me. But the fact is, the market and the demand for it is going up and up and up as we learn the connection between what we eat and our health and the longevity of our lives and all kinds of other things. Environmental technologies is intentional because it's the same kind of thing. We're talking about buildings. Okay, this is still expensive, but we are in a business that does fiberglass windows and doors. Fiberglass windows and doors hold heat dramatically better than vinyl and aluminum do. It's more expensive today. I live in Vancouver. Vancouver has got a goal to be forward thinking on these things, and regulations are happening in Vancouver that are forcing high rises and significant real estate projects to be greener for the long term future and well being of the citizens here, and et cetera. So fiberglass will gradually become an industry that is huge because regulations will drive it, just like you can no longer pollute with your car in the way that you could when I was growing up. So things do evolve. So that's an example. We're in a business that does traffic control technologies to be sure that the traffic flows smoothly, because that will reduce emissions from sitting and idling your car in a significant way. That means there's going to be less asthma. There's going to be
Hold on. All right. Did you just say I don't have to sit at red lights as long? Because
that's right.
I think you can get people to back that for not for many other reasons other
than
the environment part.
And that's my point. It's like, and And my goal is not just environment. The reason to work on environmental issues is for people. It's for people. And people need the diversity and complexity of nature and how the world got here, because that's where ultimately all the food comes from, all the materials come from, the air, the water, all of those things are part of one big system. So if I can find people love the brain freeze, a Tesla. People love their nice Tesla, right? Mm-hmm. Well, they love it because it's a great car. It also does not create emissions, and it's not burning fossil fuels. So that's where the intersection is, and why I say greatest money-making opportunity in history is you can look at every way that the world is put together. You can find an angle that does it cleaner and better, and you can make money on that. And someday you start, like I started out in organic food and I got patted on the head a lot. Okay, well, why are you even doing that? That stuff doesn't matter. I want cheaper food. And now it is a huge industry. People are making fortunes in it, and it is still less than 10% of the North American food dollar. And the job now in organic food is to get the price down, get the farms better supported. Walmart's now the largest purchaser of organic food in the world. All the major chains are starting to add it, and the prices are coming down.
Wow. I didn't know Walmart had any organic
food. Target, Walmart, Costco, they're all getting in it because the demand is growing.
Well, and I think there's part of a larger conversation is that the consumer, I hear what you're saying. It's like the consumer's just not willing to accept lower standards anymore. And this is the new standard, which has a long educational hurdle It's beginning to come to the marketplace. So let me ask you this, because you make a living at helping people find a way to do well and do good at the same time. So for some of the entrepreneurs that are listening, that are thinking, hey, I got an idea, what are some of the things that you've seen, from the companies that you guys have chosen to be a part of your fund? What are some of the things that you've seen that have been common amongst those that find the success or find that right product and customer match, etc., so that they can achieve and build the cash flow that they're looking for, but also do well and do good at the same time?
Okay, so some of these are just basic human relations and how do you build confidence in an investor. But because our stated goal is we want cleaner, better, less waste, less damage, and because those are now boom industries, we not only want somebody who sees it as a way to make a lot of money, we want people who want to make money but actually get it and embody those values and carry them as far as they can through their company. Nobody's going to be perfect. No company's going to be perfect. But if somebody's just onto, wow, solar energy is a great idea right now, I can make a killing on it. And their practices with how they employ people, how they cut corners or don't, how they follow regulations, or they take their waste out and dump it in the middle of the night in a stream, or things like that. We want people who actually have integrity and care. So they're going through the same struggle you and me are. Is how do I'm aiming towards perfect, but boy, that's a hard goal. I'm probably not going to get there. But how do I do better? And because the marketplace now wants that better product, and I'm an investor, and there's a growing number of these investors who understand this and have people behind them, because it's not our money. We put some in, but we're putting together other people's money, and then they trust us to go out and support entrepreneurs with it. But those investors are trying to do better with their money. They've got a story to tell their kids. They actually, it's a legacy thing for them. They care, and they see the business opportunity. And then the entrepreneurs, we want the ones who seem like they're going to actually succeed. And to succeed, you got to have some you got to understand what you're involved in, and you got to believe in it, and you got to be able to talk about it. So basically the summary, the simple line is, as an entrepreneur, if you're going into one of these fields and you like this angle I'm talking about, just be really informed, just like you need to be about any other aspect of your business, and be real about it.
I will go on to say, I hope someone can figure out the solar thing and bring that way down in terms of implementation costs, etc.
And you know that that's happening. You know that like right. In the last 2 years, the price of solar is left behind fossil fuels, and the world is moving there fast.
Yeah, I mean that's a big one, and I mean that was when I'm looking at our properties, etc. The one expense that I still feel is out of control that I have no way of battling is my electricity consumption at each of the locations. It's like, if I could just figure out something that could help lower that would be really, really good. So
that's right. So you have just been hooked by the premise here, which is as entrepreneurs come up with products that you can buy, that you don't have to do extra effort. You know, they're convenient, they work, they're reliable. You're going to want to bring down energy prices for your end consumer, because that's a selling advantage.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, in fact, I could see there could be a time where it's like electricity is included, because it's, that's right. That would be beautiful. I mean, you want to talk about keeping a property full.
but right now we have government that subsidizes industries that are actually outdated and need to pass on or do other things. Like oil is a really precious commodity. It should be here 1,000 years from now. It should not all be burned today, when we have the opportunity, as costs are coming down and down and down, to build the infrastructure, get solar panels on our rooftop that give us free energy for a long, long time after that. Those kind of things, those are irrefutable logics. And so entrepreneurs are the ones that make the technology better, that do it more effectively, that communicate better. And so there is the clean money revolution.
I like it 100%. So I think there's a number of people who have been listening this far. They have resonated with your message. They probably want to help in some way, shape, or form. Or just find out more about what you guys are up to. So what's going to be the best way for them to connect with you and figure out, hey, what their next step might be?
Okay. So joelsolomon.org is a website that is based on the book. And so and then the book turns into blogs and interviews like this one that'll be up there, and other information. And I do my best to point to other people, other stories. The book is loaded with stories of other entrepreneurs and that kind of thing. So that's on that level. The mission venture capital firm is Renewal Funds, FUNDS.com. And that is a classic venture capital firm, but it just has the kinds of screens and is focused on the issue areas I'm talking about. So that might be educational and informative just to look at. But I will say, we are in the era where seek and ye shall find has meant something a lot more than it did 2,000 years ago. Okay. Right. And you get on there and you start asking these questions. Or if you're in business and you want your business to represent these kinds of values better, you can find and what you need to find. So if you and there is a world of this going on as innovation is the way innovation happens. Is first the early adopters who get treated like they're crazy, money starts getting made. Right. And then other people get in it. And so you can almost pick any product or service right now, and somebody's offering it cleaner, greener, more fair. They're a better employer because they got to retain employees. This cycle is not just about this costs more, this costs less. It's about a number of things that make business go a lot easier. If you act better, there's a young, there's an emerging population now that's informed and wants to work with entrepreneurs who care about these things.
Yeah, totally understood. So, as we wind down here, there's a question that's in the back of my mind, because I know there's a number of entrepreneurs who are at the beginning of their journey. Yes. And there's there's this thing that oftentimes when listening to, other people who are further along in the journey, we can get inspired. We can feel like, yeah, you know what? I'm going to do this thing. So Joel, let's pretend for a moment that there's someone who's standing in front of what I would call the proverbial superhero outfit store. They are ready to put on their cape. They're going to do this thing and make it happen. But like I know, that in those moments, we often have a companion, and that companion comes into the form of a voice, and that voice often says things like, you can't, and who are you to think, and don't you know that that's not gonna work, and no one's ever gonna buy the green version of that. I mean, and for some people, they're even related to that voice. Yes. So my question to you is as follows. Let's pretend they're actually going to they're going to follow through. In fact, they're going to follow through in the next 24 to 48 hours. What would you say they should do?
So now we're into the emotional, the psychological, and even the spiritual aspect of this. So you could ask the same question about dating or marriage. You could ask it about having kids. You could ask it about where am I going to live? What career am I going to choose? So you need to find the mentors and the voices and the influences that you believe can help you think through the kinds of questions that you're going through. There is now a world of entrepreneurship almost as a religion going on across the globe, with incubators and trainings and mentors and angel investment, opportunities and things like this. So it's not just like you snap your fingers and you get it. Some people are very lucky and very clever. They're born in the right place at the right time. Others have to work very hard for it. But today, compared to even 10 years ago, the number of resources that are available, I mentioned, go online and find the people you can identify with, and there's that aspect. But there's also in every community now, there are elders who want to give back and help out. There's successful entrepreneurs that want to, and there's a growing ecosystem there to support you if you want to do something with your life that's actually going to help people and places be better and help the long-term future succeed. And it's all in formation right now. It's just coming on. So it's not simple. All the answers aren't just there for you. But if you're going to be a superhero, you're going to figure out how to find them and get yourself in the right places and find the right people to get interested in your idea. So I just say this is the same as any other career choice that you're going to make. You got to work hard, but you can get there.
Yep. Totally appreciate that 100%. Let me be the first to say that I thank you for championing a cause. Thank you for being an example of responsibility with resources, because oftentimes it's not what we see in the media. And we don't know that there are people out there who look, yes, I have this, but that doesn't mean I get to continue to take. Here's a way to give. Here's a way to contribute and make a difference. And I thank you for taking the time to share your knowledge, wisdom, expertise, and insights here with us today at the CashFlow Diary, sir.
You're so generous to say that. I appreciate it. And the point is, there were ancestors that came before us who cared and tried to make the world better. We are ancestors of what's coming after us, and it is our responsibility to try to leave a good world for those who come after us, whether our bloodline or whether they're just the next generations of people coming along. That is our most important purpose, being alive on the planet. So thank you very much.
All right, ladies and gentlemen. Well, you know what time it is. It's time for you to move at the speed of instruction. What does that mean? That means get over to Joel Solomon. Get over to the website. Get over to Renewal Funds. Go there. Why? Because the first step to making a difference is action. And what's simpler than going to a website, clicking a few buttons, and beginning to take that next step? I can't think of anything simpler, but at the end of the day, you now have a resource. Your questions have been answered. And most importantly, you can help become an agent of change. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been fun talking to you today. I look forward to talking to you soon. Until next time.